Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking some incredibly complex, rapidly evolving global shifts and translating them into a high-level corporate risk briefing, tailored specifically for you, the busy executive. Because let's face it, in today's interconnected world, global news isn't just news anymore. It's highly actionable market data that directly impacts your bottom line.
Okay, let's kick things off by defining the core framework of today's analysis. Think of geopolitics not just as abstract foreign policy or some distant conflict. It is literally the ultimate macro-environmental risk factor for your corporate strategy and operational stability. It's a direct, systemic risk to your operational matrix. If you're running a global enterprise right now, these shifts are your external operating conditions, and you have to manage them just like any other core business variable.
Here's the agenda for today's explainer, structured exactly as you'd view your own company's P&L and risk dashboard. We are going to cover global shifts and business risk, the energy supply chain shock, the $25 billion burn rate, domestic friction and political distractions, and then we'll wrap it all up with the executive summary.
All right, diving right into Section 1, Global Shifts and Business Risk, where we'll be assessing the macro environment.
Moving straight into Section 2, the energy supply chain shock, or as I like to think of it, fracturing the cartel.
Now, look at this dynamic. The UAE actually quitting OPEC acts as the exact geopolitical equivalent of a major Tier 1 supplier suddenly going rogue and breaking away from an industry cartel. We are literally looking at a stark scenario of OPEC with the UAE versus OPEC without the UAE. In the corporate sector, you know that when a massive supplier breaks off from a centralized distribution agreement, it completely reshapes pricing power. It sends these profound shockwaves through your entire procurement chain.
So what are the macro impacts here? Well, the UAE's exit is obviously a massive blow to the global oil cartel. But more importantly, it acts as a direct exacerbation of the ongoing energy crisis, creating an immediate shock to global supply dynamics. For an executive who's trying to plan out the fiscal year, this translates to an immediate supply chain and pricing shock that just totally alters the baseline operating environment for any global enterprise. Because energy costs dictate logistics, manufacturing overhead, and ultimately your profit margins. A shock here is for sure a shock everywhere. Which brings us to Section 3, the $25 billion burn rate, looking at capital expenditure in crisis. Just take a look at all those zeros. $25 billion. That absolutely staggering figure represents the Pentagon's reported cost of the Iran war so far. To put that into perspective for a second, that is roughly the entire annual R&D budget of a massive tech giant like Meta, just burned in a single conflict. In the business world, when a specific project or external crisis absorbs this level of capital, it demands immediate attention from the top down. It's pure financial gravity. So what we're looking at is an astronomical capital burn rate. In corporate finance terms, this places a really massive burden on the national balance sheet. It essentially acts as an unplanned, massive capex allocation that diverts vital resources away from other strategic, long-term initiatives. When your geopolitical macro environment requires a $25 billion cash burn just to manage a crisis, that injects severe, unavoidable volatility into the broader economic marketplace. And you know what happens when spending hits those levels, right? Naturally, it triggers intense shareholder scrutiny. It's actually playing out exactly like a hostile board meeting right now. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently testified before Congress, completely under fire. The executives in charge of this massive capital outlay are being called to the carpet by the board of directors to justify the ROI and explain these compounding costs. As you can see, this financial burn rate is generating heated congressional hearings and deep criticism from Democrats regarding the Pentagon spending. Now, as impartial risk assessors, we are just observing this neutrally as a pure market condition. This is classic boardroom-style friction. It perfectly highlights the strain that massive, unexpected expenditures put on governing bodies and oversight committees. It's exactly like an activist investor aggressively challenging a CEO's costly operational decisions. Okay, Section 4, domestic friction and political distractions. Basically, the cost of lost focus. Just consider the trajectory here of former FBI Director James Comey. From a past indictment to a recent controversial social media post to the present reality of a second indictment. This is the definition of a recurring legal and PR distraction. When you have high-profile figures continuously embroiled in compounding legal battles over social media activity, it aggressively consumes the news cycle. And more importantly, it consumes the limited attention span of key decision makers. Impartially speaking, this kind of recurring political infighting acts as a severe C-suite and boardroom distraction. It literally sucks all the vital executive oxygen out of the room, while critical global supply and financial shifts, like that $25 billion burn rate and the fractured oil cartel we just talked about, are happening right in the background. Think about it. If your own executive team was spending all its time managing internal PR crises and legal battles instead of securing your fragile supply chain, your company would be operating at severe risk. The exact same logic applies here on the macro geopolitical level.
Finally, Section 5, the executive summary. Bottom line up front.
So I want you to really ask yourself, if your company faced a major supply shock and a massive cash burn, could you afford boardroom distractions? As a busy executive, you have to look at the culmination of these events and ask how you would manage this exact matrix of simultaneous risks. You simply cannot afford to look at these events in isolated silos anymore. They are deeply connected.
Let's boil this down to 3 systemic risk takeaways for your dashboard. First, an energy supply chain shock, driven by the UAE leaving OPEC right in the middle of an ongoing global crisis. Second, a massive CapEx burn rate, characterized by that intensely debated $25 billion Pentagon cost for the Iran war. And third, severe operational distractions, exemplified by high-profile domestic friction like Comey's second indictment. These 3 forces are interacting simultaneously right now to shape the global operating environment that your business relies on.
I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought for your own strategic planning. With global supply lines fracturing and capital burn rates soaring, is leadership too distracted by internal friction to manage systemic risk? When external global risks hit their absolute peak, can you truly afford to be distracted by internal noise? Keep these macro risks front and center on your dashboard as you plan your next moves. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you navigate the complex quarter ahead.